I love this conversation with Susan, who is a local therapist here in our conservative county in Northern California. But I met her because she was leading a gender nonconforming group that my transgender son was referred to when he was still a teenager. And boy, it was transformational. And it goes right into that loneliness piece, that belonging, because suddenly he was in a room full of other kids who also did not fit into this gender norm that they were assigned at birth. And
Yeah.
it was that ability to talk about it and to be seen and to feel that belonging.
Yeah. I think, you and I, because we talk about this so much, understand this position of loneliness, but I think people don't understand that it really is an epidemic in the world. And there are all sorts of reasons for it, right? Not just because someone's of a different gender or color or whatever, but
Mhm.
they can, and I think she pointed this out, this was an example that you can feel completely alone in your own family,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right.
Again, the belonging or not belonging when you're just
Yes.
the odd person out.
Yeah. I mean, people just want to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
Right. And for whatever reason right now everyone's running around so angry. We're not giving people that space. Yeah, you guys are
Yeah.
gonna love Sue Simpkin for sure.
She's awesome. The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
So, welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. We are so grateful that you joined us today. We are happy to have you here. And today we will be talking with Dr. Susan Simpkin, who is a practicing psychotherapist specializing in LGBTQ plus issues, youth, and parenting. Her approaches include mindfulness strategies, psychodynamic awareness, and internal family systems theory. During her 35-year tenure as a teacher, school counselor, parent educator, and safe schools coordinator, she earned a master's degree in counseling and psychological doctorate focusing on diversity from John F. Kennedy University. Susan's been active in local organizations here in our county, such as the El Dorado Peace and Justice Community and PFLAG, which stands for Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. She served on the board of the El Dorado County Roundtable on Human Rights and the El Dorado County Human Rights Commission. She's been on the organizing committee of Placerville's Martin Luther King commemoration since its inception more than 2 decades ago. And I went to that this year for the first time, and it was fabulous. They had a marching band. It was awesome. I really enjoyed that. And then nationally and statewide, Susan was active in the International Bully Prevention Association, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Educators Network, and Equity Institute. She was a cadre trainer for the California Teachers Association Breaking the Silence program, a teachers advocacy training for LGBTQ students. So that is a lot of good work you've been doing, Susan. We are so happy to have you here on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Marci. Thank you. And it indicates how long I've been on the planet. So it's
we love that. Being on the planet is a good thing,
thank
and
you.
we get better the longer we're here, I
Okay.
think. So
That's what I think too. Yes.
yes.
I think with all that, you should be about 250 years old.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're here. I know this was not something you were excited to do, but we just kept begging because we understand how incredibly powerful you are and what a huge difference you are making on the planet. And I know Marci and I feel honored to know you, and we're honored to have you here. So like, given all that, where does one begin? We're going to let Susan give us a background and sort of how she got here, but we sort of chosen the topic of loneliness today, and the loneliness epidemic, not only in the United States, but in the world. So go ahead, Susan, take it away, give us a little background, and we'll go from there.
With all those years, Debbie, that we're referring to, I could talk for an hour just on my history, but just in a nutshell,
Yeah.
I was raised in Placerville, and my dad was he claimed to be the first veterinarian in our town, and then when I wondered what I was going to do as a profession, and ended up landing on teaching, came back to teach in the school that I actually went through. My dad was a board member at the time, so very much invested in this county.
Yes.
And I love the saying, think globally, act locally, because that's, I just believe in that. And that's where my actions have been in this county, oftentimes conservative county. And my wife and I would say, one of our sayings is sometimes the most radical thing you can say is, I'm staying. And yeah, so we stayed, and I worked for the school district as a teacher, and then I drove to Sac State to earn my master's degree in counseling and became the school counselor there. So back and forth, when they had money, they hired me as a school counselor. When they didn't, I went in the classroom. And then I retired at 60 years old and didn't want to be a therapist. This is my story to everybody. Please, God, don't make me have to be a therapist. I did not want to be. and so but I looked around, and nothing was coming up. And then a friend of mine who had a practice in El Dorado Hills said, come and we'll see how it works out. And I did, and never looked back. So grateful. So I've been a therapist for 10 years, and always had a heart for kids, because I think my childhood was sometimes hard, and not always, but sometimes hard. And I just had it. When I was 12 years old, I started teaching Sunday school. So from the beginning, I had a love for kids. So I made my practice directed towards youth, especially, and the LGBTQ community. And I think that was a place, again, in this county, there was a need for that. And people knew me and trusted me. And by then, they saw that I was going to be a therapist, and they knew that I was a trusted person to send their queer kids to, and also just their kids. And I've also loved parenting. And Marcia and Debbie, I was going to say that part of the reason I've had time to do all these things is because I didn't have kids. So I have to be transparent about that.
You didn't have a biological child, but I think you've had a lot of kids.
But that's exactly how I explain it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I taught parenting when I was a school counselor, and then working with kids. I believe in being conscious of being a parent, and anybody who wanted to have somebody walk with them, I was that person. So I work with some parents too regarding parenting.
Oh, I would have loved to have had that.
Me too.
I mean, I've had it in my later years, but boy, that's what a gift for those parents. And now we had a gentle parenting coach on, I think it was last week or the week before, but I'm so interested in this. Some call it gentle, some call it conscious parenting, but this whole idea of exactly what you said, being aware as you parent, and sort of dropping the old paradigms of whatever, bad boy, good boy, like don't do this, but like understanding what's going on with your kid right now. Why are they responding this way? Why are they clearly in this state of, oftentimes dysregulation, call it a tantrum, call it dysregulation, call it whatever, but to go back to what's going on and trying to understand it, and then to show up for them in a way that's helpful versus a way that maybe people are going to look at you and say, good mom, you tamp that
That's
down, or whatever, all the weird things that we do.
Yes, yes. And just to add to that, Debbie, got to butt in for a second. I'm a big fan of the nurtured heart approach, and so that's what I tell everybody to read and to study. And
Is that a
so,
book, The Nurtured Heart Approach?
well, it's an approach. I wish I had
Okay.
it with me. It's let me see.
Along those same lines, then, the gentle or conscious parenting.
It is. Well,
love
and
that.
okay, and then that's a whole
Right,
Yeah,
right. And
yeah,
and people
yeah.
take that and put different meanings on it. But to me,
Yeah.
that idea of trying to find out what your child's going through, and then how do you show up to support their emotional growth and
well,
development.
and this particular theory talks a lot, and I believe this too, the way that we've developed evolutionarily
Mhm.
is that we focus on the negative because
Mm.
our brains want to do that to survive. And this
Yeah.
is to really shift that with our kids to
Yes.
focus
Yeah.
on what they do right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
it's interesting because all day we've been talking about heart-centered everything. And in fact, we just had someone on from South Africa this morning, and we were talking about heart math. And Marci and I created the company called Cour Experience, which is heart-centered training. So all of that is near and dear to us. And it doesn't matter who we're talking to about what subject. That one thing, the heart always shows up in almost every single conversation. So speaking of hearts, I want to talk about the subject that you brought up, actually, which we have known about, but really have not had anybody so willing to discuss.
mhm.
Um, and that is of the loneliness epidemic that's going on locally, the U.S., all around the world, I'm pretty sure. And I think the epidemic showed us all what that really meant. So,
Mm.
so, so elaborate and tell us why you wanted to have this discussion.
Well, there's two things. One is in the last couple years, it has really come to me that the people I work with, all the people I work with adults too, and that the theme that I put together with really, I would say all of their stories is how we yearn to be ourselves, how we
Mm.
yearn to be seen, how we yearn to understand our own selves and have other people understand who we are. So that was a piece that is way in the front of my brain now
Mhm.
in these days. And then I started listening and being exposed to Vivek Murthy, and
Oh,
he wrote
yes.
this book together. This man is an amazing man. He was our
Mm.
Surgeon General under
Yes.
Obama, and now he's our Surgeon General again. And
Yes.
he wrote this book, and if anybody is interested in learning more about what I'm talking about, to me, this is the Bible for that. And I had a case, and I was going to tell about this case too. A young woman who I've seen her for a long time. I've known her since she was maybe 13, and now she's 18. And what I learned from her as she became aware of her role in the family,
Mm.
is that she wasn't like her family,
Mm.
and how alone she
Yes.
and
Yes.
that she was kind of stuck in this role because most all systems, I don't know systems that don't have roles, families in particular.
Mhm.
And so as we worked together, and really bright girl, she started seeing how it worked in her family. And I thought at the same time I started reading his work and listening to him,
Hmm.
she came forward with this realization that she wasn't authentic to her family,
Mhm.
and she felt alone. And the more I did research, the more I understood that what the idea of being alone is about feeling different.
Yeah.
And I think
Yes.
she, and I think that there's a rub between um how do we get along when we know we're different? I think that's really important. And how do we navigate that? Because I think when we understand that we're different, like you don't just ghost your family and move out and
Mm.
never be, related, how we learn to deal with that and navigate that's really important. But she was an important person for me to see, that she felt alone in that family. And that was one of her, that was just one of the things that she brought to the table.
Yeah.
That reminds me of what Brene Brown says about belonging versus fitting in, and that idea that either you're in the space where you just belong naturally, or you're striving to fit in, which is very different.
Yes. Yes.
So I was doing a bit of research before we got together, because I wanted to know myself really what was going on. I mean, there's tons of statistics and Harvard studies and on we go. But Marci and I have understood this to be true with the work that we were trying to do these live workshops with kids, and around their alienation and what was going on. And how much do you think the whole the digital world, if you will, has exacerbated this situation?
Off the charts.
Yes.
And I'm old school. You see my gray hair? I'm old school. When parents ask me, what should I do about the phone? My answer is, you need to regulate the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and partly, specifically, Debbie, what this is, I think the loneliness is how kids compare themselves, and it's false. The
Right.
presentations of people's stories are unidimensional, one-dimensional. Which is fine, but
Yeah.
when you get into that, you forget, and then you start comparing yourself to that, like how many friends you have, how many likes you have, all those things.
Right.
So I just think it's off the charts. I think it's off the charts, and it's addicting too. That's a whole nother podcast right there, but it's physically addicting as well.
And
So
designed to be that way.
yes, and designed to be that way.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard, and it's easy for me to tell parents, you need to monitor that. You need to be the Gestapo on that.
Yeah.
But kids, and it's true, it's their social world. It's when they're around their friends, everybody's looking, everybody's talking through that medium.
Yeah.
And it's the wave at school, and parents have a hard time speaking against the wave. And I don't blame them. It would be very hard to say no when it's a tsunami.
Yeah.
And that's what parents are asked. They're asked to manage that or to stand up against that. And I don't know what's out there for parents, but it really is it's a parenting issue and a support issue for parents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're talking about certain generations. We work with a woman. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. Her name's Vashti Somerville. She's a parent coach. She's up in Idaho, which is where suicides are actually highest in the country, there in Alaska, for our youth. But there's so much around even the millennials. She found herself not even working with the younger kids, but those millennials who were, 25, 26, they're really having a difficult time, and so much suicide in those age groups, right? Like, she felt like they were struggling the worst. Those were sort of the guinea pig kids, right?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
We didn't know then what we know now.
We did not.
It's hard to even imagine how different life is now, since, in these last 20 years, since the phones started to become just something everyone had, and how that changed everything. And obviously there's some good too, but then you're right, guinea pigs, we just raise these kids with that attachment, basically. And it is super difficult to figure out the ways to limit it, and so very important.
Yeah, and if it's okay, I really like in Vivek's book, there's a guy who he quotes, and let me say what he says. His name is David Anderson, Dr. David Anderson. He's the Senior Director of National Programs and Outreach for the Child Mind Institute. He says, as parents, and I love what he says, it's not going back to my day, but it's integrating what we have now with what he has said will help balance what kids are doing on their phones. He says, have high quality and age appropriate face-to-face friendships. So
Yes.
I know that some people who feel alone and who feel isolated can actually reach out to friends online. But what he's not saying don't do that. What he's saying is balance that with face-to-face
Balance.
friendships too.
Yes.
Right.
He
Yes.
says extracurricular activities with high interest. And that could be drama or music. It could be creative too. It could be sports. Again, I think that what he's talking about is actually face-to-face interactions and movement in groups. Movement
Yes.
in groups. He says family time, and that sometimes that's a hard commodity to come by these days.
Yeah.
Shared screen time with your parents, and then talk about what you're seeing.
Yeah.
He says to have free time. And one of the things I was going to bring to this podcast today is when I was looking at what we want, how we discover ourselves is not when our lives are filled with a lot of busyness. It's those
Exactly.
moments when we can paint by ourselves, we can walk, we can listen to ourselves. So he says free time.
Yeah.
He
So
says
just because you're being alone doesn't mean you're lonely.
that's right.
It's
That's
getting
right.
comfortable with yourself
That's right.
and having some space and quiet. Yes.
That's right. That's exactly right. He says school performance and engagement and basic wellness practices. And that's pages, that's books and books of stuff that we can do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You
And
know,
that's the kind of stuff we have in our core tools, those basic things, like some of what you just talked about, taking a walk, but also bilateral tapping and meditation and yoga and journaling and as you said, art or creativity, whatever your art is. And art can be almost anything, from macaronis glued to something to paintings to audio and visual and like all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and I think the most important piece of that, right, is the actual acknowledgement of this idea that you're lonely, right? Because first of all, we have this thing around emotions that we, especially those of us who are older, were never taught what emotions are. What do you do with an emotion? Like that whole thing. So this idea that human beings can actually be honest with themselves about, wow, like I am feeling kind of lonely and I am feeling like, there's no one to talk to or whatever. I'm tired of picking up my phone and sort of, what do I do with that? And then, because then what happens is, as talk about what happens as a result of the loneliness, right? So then all the other things start to show up, right? The anxiety and the depression, and then that spirals, and then we have all those other things. So is it true then what you've been able to do is identify maybe the loneliness is sort of root cause, and then all these other things come as a result? Is that the way
I don't see it that way. I see it as a weaving together that these things there doesn't, in my view, I don't think one happens and then these other things are the result of it. I think that the loneliness comes up out of a lifestyle, or it comes up for instance, during the pandemic, or being online, or that the family can't support you in the way you need, or whatever. I just think it's really it's really woven. And and here's what I think too. I'm not sure that if you deal with loneliness, you've dealt with the problem. I don't think it's a root problem. I think you're dealing with all those things. And as a therapist, that's how I feel about it when somebody sits across from me. When I hear a theme come up, we can talk about it, but to me, you're trying to separate out all the things that are causing this person angst.
Right.
And I just think loneliness is one of them. And there's so many reasons for loneliness. If you can build self-esteem, if you can build self-love, to me, and that part that I brought up earlier about who you are, your authenticity.
Yes.
I would say, if I was going to say anything, and I haven't really thought all that much about it, I would say that's the root.
Yeah, that self-love, that worthiness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. That's a huge one. That's a huge one. So how do you address that, like with kids, like and parents? How do you help to build? Because I think they come in with it, like, the way a 2-year-old will hold his shirt up and slap his belly and, take up all the room and all the space in the room very happily. And then how do we not shut it down, basically, I guess is a better question, not how to let it build and thrive versus shutting it down by telling, people you need to be quiet or stop being so loud, or like, I don't talk about
It's
that a little bit.
insidious. I think it's
Yeah.
insidious and hard, and we do it even with our best intentions. We do it.
Yes. Mhm.
So I think that the one thing that I thought in this podcast I would say to advise parents that I hear over and over, and again, I only hear one side, so I know that, and I wasn't a parent. And I think if parents can be curious, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the number one things, not to get
Mhm.
reactivated, not to be, and I think it's okay for parents they live longer, they know, but to remember their kid is growing and
Mhm.
just to be curious. To be curious. I wish that parents had been curious with my young woman, whatever the questions
Yeah.
are, instead of being the teller, being the asker. So that's what I think
Yes.
parents ought to be doing. And then the building of that self-esteem thing, also strong believer, tell everybody I work with, therapy is just a piece of the pie. There's a whole
Mhm.
pie. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
therapy is not the end all, and it's not, and talk therapy is not the only kind of therapy. So um, in that piece of the pie, this is what I can do. I can put my judgments aside. I will have judgments. We all do.
Mhm.
I can put them in context. I go to a consultation every single week with other therapists to flesh out my own whatever I'm bringing. I'm trying really hard to bring sort of a neutral person to the room, but the neutral, and this is that sounds unright when I say this, but the other piece is, how can I love the person in front of me? How
Mm.
can I be with them
Yeah.
and just allow them to be who they are and say what they
Yeah.
want and make it safe and care for them? So that's kind of what I think about
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's good.
and that's around parenting too, because I know my kids are adults now, but still teaching me all the time. And that's one thing that one of my sons has told me a few times, like, I just need you to, essentially, I just need you to listen right now, or I don't think you're hearing me. And I'm getting into my story. It's that old paradigm, like he might say something negative about himself, and then I want to immediately start fixing, and no, that's not true, and la la la.
Yes.
And then he's like, you're not hearing me. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I don't want to hear this,
Yes.
but now I have to take a pause and breathe and say, okay, I'm sorry, you go ahead. And then that next step is, well, would you like some advice, or do you want to hear my opinion, or did you
Yes.
just need to be
Love
heard?
that.
And woo,
Love that. Yeah.
that's a big shift.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And again, I wasn't a parent, but even in my
Mm.
room, I notice, and that's why I go to consultation, because even in my room, sometimes I want to fix it. I
Yeah.
don't want to hear that. It's uncomfortable, or they're not heading in a good direction, and you'd love
Yeah.
to just take the point. All you want
Yeah.
to do is point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come here. I know what to do. Just
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I got you. Yeah.
uh, yeah.
You've done all this beautiful work in the LGBTQ plus
Mhm.
arena, and I would love for you to talk about that, or sort of the evolvement of that group of human beings, and how everyone can show up with more love on the planet right now, because quite frankly, I'm a little disgusted. So help me help me
Yeah.
to have a little faith in what's going on in the planet around this. And I know you're a great leader around this, so tell us a little bit about that work.
uh, you're asking at a bad moment, because yesterday some statistics just came out that support for LGBTQ the community has actually declined. Not huge, but declined a couple of percent. I think what's going on Not to throw anybody in the bus, not under the bus. But I just think with the religiosity that's going on right now, there are people in the pulpit saying, that these are people to be hated. And that's how repressive governments begin, is by having the other be very distinct.
Yes.
So I see it that way. I see it that way. And mostly my experience is in El Dorado County because I grew up here, and I know I worked with kids here who identify as queer, and the first thing they want to do is get out of here. And I said that to the board of the supervisors.
Yeah.
As the commission chair, I
Yeah.
don't think they liked hearing that. I don't think they liked hearing it. And partly why I think is because, first of all, they had a lot on their plate, but I think also they don't know what to do. People don't know what to do with it. They don't know what to do about it. And being an ally is really hard. It's really hard. And when you're in a political environment where a group of people is getting targeted, or that they aren't welcome, or somehow it's not a good place for them, it's hard to know what to do. So I don't know. I don't know how to say it, my own journey, because I started working back in the 70s at a school district here, and my wife and I have been together for 48 years, and we lived in the valley because I was so fearful of working up here. And it was at a time when there was legislation in California that if you were an ally or a gay person, you couldn't work with kids in schools.
Yes.
It's been hard.
Yeah.
So
Just
it's been hard.
ignorance.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I think my work has been, what I have found for me is that not to get too entrenched in this county's point of view, and not too entrenched in my own fear, but to remember that there are other places and other ways and organizations that really do step up and really do support, our movement. And so, and our movement. So that, I guess that's kind of the overall point of view.
Last year, speaking in this area again, so we're in El Dorado County in the foothills of the Sierra, but we are not so far from Sacramento, which is a much more progressive area. And so I joined a group last year called Free Mom Hugs. And so this is a group that started by a mom, and the idea is to show up and just offer unconditional love to LGBTQIA plus folk who didn't receive that in the home. And so the first event I went to was Pride in Sacramento last year. So the Pride Day Festival. And so we stand out in front of our booth, we're wearing, our Pride gear, and we have our free hugs, pins, and shirts on. And so you just see all these people walking back and forth. They're having a great time. It's a party. It's really fun. And there's people who, they walk over, they look over to see what you're doing. They read the free mom hugs, and then they, some are just excited and they come running over for their hug. But there are a significant number who read it and then tear up, and then their face, starts to fall, and they come over slowly to receive that. And it's just, it's kind of breathtaking. And you just give this long hug to someone who didn't get that somewhere at home or somewhere else. And it's just and I as a mother of a transgender person, I just want to say to other parents, if there's anyone listening who's struggling with this, just love your kid. They're awesome. They're wonderful. There's nothing, you can kind of say, oh, they're going to have a harder life, they're going to have this or that. Well, not if we stop making it that way. They're amazing. Just embrace and then this community is so joyful and so resilient and so beautiful. So, I want people to just open up to that.
Thank you for that story. I appreciate that. Whenever we would go to Gay Pride, there'd be a contingent of P-flag parents, made me cry every time. Because I was broken with my mom for about 20 years. And it had to do with religion. And but when you see that, and again, coming back to the alone, and maybe that resonated for me, that there was a part of me that felt kind of alone. Alone in my family, alone in this community. And you see, and God love us, we're resilient folks,
Totally.
and we seek out places where we can be who we are.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as the bottom line is, as any human being, no matter your color, your shape, your size, whatever gender, whatever, we're all just here for a human connection,
Yes.
right? That's
Yes.
all we really want. Speaking of the
Yes.
hug, right?
Yeah.
And all the things. And that's all we can really ask for. And,
Yes.
I would have thought, and I was so disappointed. I felt like, the coming of the pandemic created something that we'd never seen before. There was an extreme amount of loneliness.
Mhm.
And I thought at that point, we've learned our lesson. We're not going to be mean to people anymore. Like we need
Oh,
people. We need
yes.
to connect, right?
Yes.
And now we're back to this nonsense again. And I'm looking to Susan to give us some hope, like in the overall scheme of things where we are progressing, right? I want to know that. And if we're not, like, what else can I do? Right. And what else can these parents do to make it better for the next generation of human beings coming who just want love and connection?
I don't know. At this age, and I've been an activist my whole life, and at this age, I think I'm at this place. I'm not the person to answer that because I have
Mm.
this. I used to think things could really change. We're going to
Mhm.
change, but we're at a hard time politically in our
We're in a
country
hard
too.
time.
So,
Yeah.
but I think there are moments when I think, when will we learn this lesson?
Yes.
Because it feels so similar to other times in the past.
Yeah.
And it feels like we've been working in my little lifetime. And
Yeah.
it feels like,
Yeah.
what have we accomplished? And I know we have,
We
but
have.
man, is it slow. The gears move slow.
I think I have two things to say to that. One is I think of going back to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the statement he says about the arc of justice
Yes.
being long. So,
Yes.
we're here looking at this one part going,
Yes.
oh my
Yeah.
God, what's going
Yes.
on? But it is
Yeah.
long. And then the other thing that, and Debbie and I talk about this a lot, but I have a minister who always comes back to this idea that right now we're in this chaotic place because these old paradigms are breaking down,
Yes.
these old
Yes.
paradigms, and they're fighting back with
Yes.
everything they got. It's ugly
Yes.
and it's messy, but it's part of the unfoldment of something better. And yeah, I really want to be there to see that. But for
Yeah.
sure, I'm gonna be part of it. Like I'm gonna be here
Yeah.
showing up for it and know that my kids and my grandkids and next generations will see a better world, a more loving world, a more compassionate world, an accepting world, with less of this otherness, of this idea that there's us and them, and knowing that we're all us. It's just us.
Well, and you think about World War II, and you think about how Hitler had other people, the
Yes.
Jews, and you wonder, can we really learn from that about the other? Can we learn in these times where women are being subjugated, where the queer community is being the other?
Yeah.
Is there a part of the message that can be heard? Because we know the message, we know that, and we've lived it. And I wonder that. I wonder,
Yeah.
can we have information alone? Will information alone make the difference?
Well, unfortunately, I think these new generations are coming in just more evolved, more conscious, more aware. And so some of it just might be the dying out of the literal
That's right.
dying out of the
That's right.
old
Yes.
patriarchal ideas,
Yes.
as we become more just more multicultural, more, as especially as Black and brown people start to become the majority, and
Yes.
and queer people are showing up more and more and being able to speak. Like it's a process. And yeah,
Yes.
I am the eternal optimist, but it's rough
Yes,
right
she is.
now.
They don't call her joyful Marci for nothing. She keeps us all going. She keeps us all going. Oh my goodness, I am afraid we are out of time, Susan. I so want to have you back, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, there's so many other topics out there.
Oh my goodness, we just like tipped,
Yeah.
one conversation of many that we can have. So we'd love to have you back for a number of topics, but
don't stress about it. Like, you know,
yes, we're fun.
you
We're
did
fun.
great. And it
fun.
was, yes,
Thank you.
yes. And
Yes,
we're going to reference some of the books that you talked about together, I think was one of them. We'll put those in the show notes. You gave me some references. We'll put those there so that if these topics are of interest to you, that you can do a little more research and get in there.
That's
yeah.
right.
And
And
are
thank
you
you for your
still?
patience, both of you.
Oh, we
Oh,
love you.
no
We
worries.
love
Yeah.
you. By the way, are you still taking on clients, or are you full? Do you? No.
I think I have a pretty specific practice of kids
Yes.
and queer people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I have people calling me. And because my rates are really reasonable, I don't deal with insurance companies, but man,
Yeah.
Mm.
people call me all the time. And that's kind of the way it is around the county.
Mm.
People are full. People are full.
Oh
Yeah.
yes.
So
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, dear.
Okay.
Keep up the good fight. We're
I
right
will,
there with you.
for
Yes.
sure.
Thank
Thank
you,
you too.
Susan.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate today. Thank you.
Mhm. And now for your core mental health break. This is your opportunity to take a moment to support your mental wellness, your peace of mind, your own ease and grace. Take some time every day to support your mental health. You deserve it, and it matters. Pause. Receive a deep breath in through your nose, filling your belly, allowing it to expand. Pause. Release the air through your nose, slowly. Pause. Receive another breath through the nose, allowing the belly to expand. Pause. Release the air again through the nose, slowly. Receive one final deep breath through the nose, allowing the belly to expand. Pause. And release that air back through your nose, gently, easily. Thank you for pausing for yourself today. Your mental health is important, and you deserve peace, calm, and ease in your life every day. So please choose to receive it. It is always available right at your center, your heart, your core. Stay well, friends. Thank you for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Thanks to Samuel Hale LLC for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beaton. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, producers, or financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. The Warrior Parent Podcast is a production of Cour Experience. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.